So today's goals. As schools transition to the Common Core standards, new terms and areas of emphasis are emerging. And these are things that are and will have a significant impact on the type of instruction we deliver for our students. One area that's receiving a lot of emphasis is close reading. And we have 3 goals in today's training. The first is to explore what close reading is. The second is to understand why close reading is important. And the third is to learn several instructional strategies for conducting close reading in your own classroom. And we're going to watch video models and examine which types of texts are appropriate for close reading. So before we do this, let's just take a few minutes to review the Common Core state standards to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we all have a shared understanding of what they are and how close reading fits in. So what is close reading? How does this concept fit in with the Common Core standards? In the reading portion of the standards, the importance of close reading is emphasized, along with several other new terms, such as text-dependent questions, accessing complex text, text evidence, and the increased emphasis on informational text reading. But what do the reading standards actually say? Well, there are 4 major themes or categories of skills in the reading portion of the Common Core standards. These include key ideas and details, craft and structure, integration of knowledge and ideas, and range and level of text complexity. Now, just to make sure everybody's still engaged, I want to ask everyone, you should see a box in your GoToMeeting screen that says questions. If you press on the plus sign, it'll expand that for you. And in the box, just go ahead and type in the words that you see highlighted in red, just so that I can gauge how many people are actively participating. And I also want to note that if you have any questions that come up for you during this training, that same box, you just want to go ahead and type your question in there. We may not have time to address all of the questions that are asked during the presentation, but please know that if you type in your question in that box, we will get a response to you via email. So I just want to say that up front in case. I don't want you to think that nobody's looking at your questions. We absolutely are. Okay, so I see several people saying that they see key details, a key idea and details. Thank you very much. It really does help to see what everyone's writing. And somebody's asking me to please speak louder, and I will try to do just that. Thank you for letting me know you're having a hard time hearing. I appreciate that. Okay. So yes, the first category, key idea and details, specifically focuses on careful reading of text. So let's go ahead and take a closer look. The individual standards under reading are very consistent. For the sake of discussion, I've combined the reading literature and reading informational text standards for grades 1 and 4, just so that we can compare them. So as I read these, what I'd like you to do again to encourage some active participation is I'd really appreciate it if you could type in your questions box anything, any words that pop out at you as we compare the difference between the grade 1 standard and the grade 4 standard. So in grade 1, students are expected to be able to ask and answer questions about key details in text. That means students must have very specific and complete understanding of what is important in their reading. By grade 4, students are expected to use important details and examples from text to support their own inferences about the text. So I see popping up on the screen, there are several people who have written That students grade 1 may not be in as in-depth, Linda said that, as in grade 4. Diane says refer, draw inferences are some of the words that pop out at her. And Lisa noted the words that students are expected to refer to text explicitly. Okay, so thank you. Thank you all for participating. So the standards highlighted. What do we really mean when we say close reading? And what makes this type of reading different from the type of reading instruction we typically see in classrooms? What I'd like you to do is look at the poll questions that we're going to post another question on the screen. And you're going to see a question that says, as it's asking you, which of the following is true about close reading? And you'll see 5 choices. So you'll see careful examination of the text, reading and rereading for specific purposes, using evidence from the text to support answers, an argument, or a conclusion based on the text, best applied to appropriately complex text, and all of the above. So go ahead and answer your poll question. Okay, I'm going to wait for a few more votes to come in. Which of the following is true about close reading? Okay, so let's see what we have here. I'm having trouble seeing what the responses were. So if you answered any of these choices, you would be, well, the first 4 choices you would be correct, but if you answered the last choice, all of the above, you're absolutely correct. Each of these components is part of close reading. So close reading is going to entail all of these different things. When we talk about close reading, according to author and leading educator Doug Fisher, close reading is a careful and purposeful rereading of a text. It is going inside the book, like really diving inside the book to figure out what the author is saying and why. So let's take a deeper look. Let's delve a little bit deeper into exactly what close reading is by looking at those characteristics we just saw in our poll. The 4 key characteristics of close reading are careful examination of the text. It's a careful examination of the text because it's an examination that requires the reader to go deeper than he or she does in a first read to really get at the heart of the meaning of a text and analyze it for a specific purpose. Secondly, the reader reads and rereads the text for any number of specific purposes, such as looking at the organization of a text or the writer's craft, or rereading to solve comprehension breakdowns or areas of confusion with the text. And the teacher guides a close reading by asking the students text-dependent questions. You're going to hear that a lot in this training. Text-dependent questions, and the students must cite evidence from the text to support answers to these questions, or to present an argument, or support a conclusion based on the text. And close readings are best applied to appropriately complex text. You would not do a close reading with every text you have your students read in any given week. So you're going to be really intentional about selecting the text. We've mentioned text evidence and its importance for close reading, so let's define the term. I think it's important that we do that. Text evidence includes the words and illustrations in a text that support an answer to a question, argument, or conclusion a reader makes about the text. Let's look at why close reading is important in the classroom and why it's so critical to the Common Core state standards. First, close reading is required when students go to college or the workplace. In your question box, please type for me a type of job that would require reading. Okay, so Lisa says a statistician or a scientist. Claudia says a teacher. Jennifer, an editor. Absolutely. Deborah says a teacher, a doctor. I see Diane says a lawyer, a teacher. Jesselyn says a writer. So you're absolutely right. There are countless jobs in which the worker is expected not only to be able to read, but to synthesize and analyze information to better perform at that job. Secondly, close reading is really a deeper analysis of a text that builds students' overall understanding of that text. In short, it aids in comprehension. The discussions students have about the text during close reading, they further develop their understanding and use of key vocabulary. And thirdly, the following close reading with writing about the text provides an opportunity for students to further their understanding of the text and better prepares them for higher quality, more detailed writing, the kind of writing that's required in college and in the workplace. So now, excuse me, I'm sorry, I should have had this slide up previously. So we talked about connections to the real world, connections to making meaning, being able to actually understand and make meaning of the text, and then really critical is that ability to explain their thoughts and be able to understand, to show that they understood what they read through their writing. So now that we've looked at what close reading is and why it's important, let's get into how it impacts the classroom. We're going to do that by watching a video in which author and leading educator, Dr. Timothy Shanahan, discusses this shift and addresses teachers' concerns, such as the time issues. And I just want to give a little disclaimer. There may be a little bit of a delay with loading the video, so please just bear with us in the technical issues. And if for any reason there's a problem with the video, I just want you all to rest assured that you're all going to get a link with this video so you can see it in its totality and you can refer to it again at your leisure.
Teachers have a lot of concerns about the changes to things like close reading. The Common Core not only is giving teachers some different things to teach, but it's really, because those things are so different, it's really leading teachers to have to teach in some different ways. And of course, if you're a teacher, that's a real concern because you want to get it right, you want to do it well. Certainly one of the concerns is just the time concern. How much time is this going to take? Close reading sounds like it's not going to fit my classroom well, and I think that's pretty important. In the past, quite often teachers might spend several minutes, maybe, I've seen pre-reading lessons go on for 15, 20, 25 minutes before they even get into the text. And then once they start reading the text, they stop frequently and constantly to talk sometimes about the story and what might be hard about it, or the article, what might be hard about it, or what the students need to think about it. But a lot of times there's a lot of side talk. With close reading, you really try to shave away as much as you can to keep the focus on the text. And so pre-reading still goes on, but it might be a much briefer amount of time. So instead of spending several minutes trying to get ready for a particular text, you might spend a very few minutes and then spend a lot more time reading and rereading and talking about the text. And so it's not so much more time, the shift of how you're using the time. And I think that's very important. Having, for example, a set of questions that are really text-dependent questions so that you're not scrambling to try to figure out what could I ask students about what the text says or how it works or what it might mean. Having some model questions there to help guide you can save the teacher a lot of time and keep the event focused. As such, I mean, you wouldn't use close reading every lesson. You wouldn't use it with every text you read. Not only would that get tiring and a bit boring, but not every text really is worth that level of intensity and that level of thoroughness.
Okay, no technical issues. So let's take a close look at some of the implications that Dr. Shanahan raised in the video. One of the biggest concerns, as he mentioned, that teachers have when they begin to explore what close reading is the issue of time. Dr. Shanahan recommended some key strategies to balance time during our reading instruction. First, we should avoid lengthy front-loading prior to reading a text. Sure, we can address essential prior knowledge, but we want to avoid pre-reading activities that take 15 to 25 minutes of instructional time. Second, we want students to spend the bulk of their time reading the text and working through it, as we pose text-dependent questions to help students get at the root meaning of the text. So we want to shave away other types of questions and other types of, as he said, side talk. Third, during the reading of the text, we can spend less time on teaching and practicing reading strategies, although some of that will occur, and more time actually reading and working through the text to develop meaning. Now that we have talked about some of the implications, you've heard me mention text-dependent questions several times. Let's hear what Dr. Timothy Shanahan has to say about text-dependent questions and how we ask them in the classroom.
One of the features of close reading is this intensive emphasis on text, and so the questioning that teachers ask really matters a great deal. Close reading is really pushing teachers to ask questions specifically about the ideas in the text, the meaning of those ideas, and how that specific text is working. And so text-dependent questions, questions that you cannot answer unless you have information from this specific text, really are the key. And so, trying to get students focused on the text and not just asking low-level questions.
We're really going to be reading closely, and we're going to be looking for those answers. And when we find those answers, this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be looking with our text evidence sticks. So you're reading the text today, right? And as we read through, we find answers. Here is our proof. Here is our answers. These are the author's words. These are the words that prove what we're saying or that answer my question.
Of course, to answer those kinds of questions, if the student really does rely on the text, they have to, it's easy to push them towards providing evidence. So, you say that the little girl did this because of, why do you think that? What did the author tell you that supports that idea? The mother made this choice. Why did she make that choice? How do you know that? Can you go back into the text and find that information? The Common Core emphasizes they not just figuring out what a text says, but actually being able to collect information from text and to use that information as evidence to make your own arguments, state your own positions, to set up your own opinions, and so on. And so this idea of intensively questioning students about the ideas in the text, getting them to use text evidence initially just to answer questions, but very quickly towards using that evidence in their own writing, in their own presentation, and so on, becomes very, very important in the Common Core.
We just kind of told what the plot was. I want you to put that in your own words. Elizabeth Willie, the author, wrote about, okay, Dr. Parker, what did I write about? Talk about it. What do you write about?
So it's critically important that teachers stay to the text and ask those text-dependent questions and steer students towards using text evidence and not just answering questions that you can sort of state an opinion about. In a lot of classrooms, it looks like students can participate because you don't really need to pay much attention to the text. You can kind of snow the teacher a little bit. I mean, you can give your own opinion. You can sort of steer things away from the text. The Common Core really steers you back to the text. And so if the student doesn't know that the author had 3 pieces of evidence and what those were, they're in real trouble when it comes to the discussion because it's really going to steer them towards that kind of thing.
Excuse me, let me actually stop this. I apologize. So what I'd like you to do now is, just as you just finished watching a really great and very informative video, so in your question box, if you could just type in what were some of the takeaways, some of the things that stood out to you about what Dr. Shanahan was saying that maybe perhaps you hadn't thought about before, or that you really see as something that's going to be a teaching implication for you and your colleagues as you begin to teach close reading. So I'll share one of mine. I really got when he said, that students could snow the teacher sometimes because they give you like this really great argument and all this opinion and there's nothing to back it up. And I was like, oh, I've been in classes like that for sure. Lisa says, like the text evidence sticks may be better suited for primary students. Absolutely. You're gonna look to see what's gonna work with your students. It could be just telling them to turn to a specific page and point to a specific paragraph. Linda says, focus on details from the text rather than opinions. Absolutely. Anything else? Anyone else have something? Answering questions with their own opinion and look for the evidence to support it. Absolutely. That was, let me see, that was Jennifer. Thank you. And Diane says, look to the text, cite the page, the number, the keyword. So again, we're modeling in our questioning what we want students to be able to do during the discussion. And watching my time limits, pay more attention to how much time I have. That was from Anne Marie. And focusing on details, details, details. Absolutely. So thank you, everyone, for participating and sharing your answers. Let's take a look at those details, 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 and the text-dependent questions. A really important distinction to make is that text-dependent questions are not just literal questions. They're often higher-order inferential questions in which the details in the text help the reader draw the necessary conclusions. So some types of questions you might already use that are representative of these types of questions used during close reading instruction include those asked during QAR, or question-answer recall, questioning the author prompts, or Bloom's taxonomy higher-level questions. So we're not just answering those lower-level questions, asking lower-level questions. We're actually asking higher-order thinking questions that require the students to look for the evidence in the text to support their answers. The goal here is clear. Dr. Shanahan states, teachers have to make sure that when students walk away from that reading group, they actually know what the article is about, that they really understood the story and could talk about it and write about it. in the past, we'd sort of read it and be done with it and kind of forget about what was read. That's really off the table. So the implication is that we really got to dive into the story, make sure the students can not only read it in terms of decoding it, but that they're able to understand it, gain a deeper meaning of it, and then be able to talk and write about it. And that's where we're actually talking about a different type of instruction in some cases. Now I'm going to take a look at, somebody mentioned that might have been better for primary class. Now we're going to look at an older class and take a look at a close reading in action in a real classroom. And in this video, we'll see a portion of a close reading lesson. And the students have already read the selection once. Now, based on the confusion that the teacher has noticed in their notes, the teacher guides the students through a second close reading to clarify those confusions and highlight the core meaning of the text. So let's take a look. And I will tell you that this is a much longer video than the others, so I may actually just show a portion of it, but the purpose for viewing is to notice how the teacher uses what he noticed from the students to guide the closer reading of the text.
In this video, Wiley Blevins conducts a close reading of an extended text with his students. Close readings should occur after students have read a text at least one time. As the class rereads the text together, notice that Mr. Blevins uses an instructional routine in which he models close reading habits and asks guiding questions that lead them back to the text. Students are encouraged to take notes as a tool to conduct their close reading. Mr. Blevins frequently partners students in pairs and small groups within whole class instruction to deepen their engagement in the text.
Well, when I was circulating and looking at the notes that you were taking, I noticed that there were some places that were a little puzzling or caused some of these some confusion. And so once we finish the story, it's really great to go back in and do a close second read so that we can clarify some of these confusions. And while we do our close second read of The Boy Who Invented TV, we're also going to fill in our sequence chart where we're going to list the major events in Philo's life. Those events that really show us that someday he's going to become a great inventor. Okay? So let's begin. And let's start at the beginning on page 69. I want you all to turn there, put your finger on that first paragraph. It says in that first sentence, imagine what it was like growing up on a farm in the American West of 1906. So how was life different in 1906? What the author really is asking us to do is think about life today versus life long ago. So I want you to look in that first paragraph and find some text evidence that would give me some clues as to how life was different in 1906 than today. And when you find a piece of text evidence, I want you to read it aloud to us so that we can all see that evidence. Okay, give me one piece of text evidence to lay out.
It says, meeting up with others took some effort. You rode a horse or walked.
Do we ride horses to school today?
No.
Do we walk?
No.
Only if we live really close. Great piece of text evidence. Very different back in 1906 from today. Deontay, share another piece of text evidence.
No refrigerators, no cars, no phones, hardly any indoor bedrooms.
I don't know if I could survive without a refrigerator, a car, a phone, or an indoor bathroom. What about you guys?
Yeah.
Why do you think the author wants us to think about what life was like in 1906? Why is that important for us understanding the story? Turn to your partner and talk about that, because I see a lot of you thinking about why that might be so. Anyone want to share why they think the author thought that was important?
He wanted us to know like how hard it was for him to like kind of come up with making TV.
Yeah. It just was a huge leap in technology that Philo figured out. Turn to page 70. And on page 70, we learn a lot about important events in Philo's life that led to him becoming the inventor of the television. Somebody has shared me a surprising fact. What are some things we learned on page 70? If you could just sum up the big idea of page 70 that we could add to our first box in the sequence chart. If I were still a young boy, what did he do? Thornton, what might that be? And how did he get his ideas? What was he so interested in on this whole page that gave him ideas? You're right. So there were lots of machines that he became interested in. You want to add to that, Guillermo?
He said to go to the train station. He was afraid at first.
Yeah.
Instructor took him, showed him how it kind of worked.
So he was fascinated by machines. That's sort of step one of becoming a great inventor. You have to be fascinated or interested in how things work. So for our first entry in our sequence chart, why don't we write that Philo became interested in machines?
Okay. So again, I would love to know what are some of the takeaways, some of the things that you noticed the teacher doing in order to get the students to actually delve into the story and look for text evidence. I'll give you a couple seconds to type. So Dessalines says use of graphic organizers to structure the lesson. Again, that's right, Dessalines, thank you. They're capturing the students' responses in the graphic organizer. Diane also mentions the graphic organizer. I see several people have put that purposeful questioning as Amy's comment. And Linda says, have them physically go back and find the details about the questions to fill in the sequence organizer. Someone said, does the teacher modify the text or begin to teach this close reading with the whole group? Again, this is a class that's already read the story, okay? And they've read the story one time, and now the teacher is taking them through a second, deeper read of the story. And if you remember when I prefaced the video, I said that the teacher, as he walked around, noticed that the students were having some confusion regarding what they were reading. So based on what he saw, again, being very observing of what the students are writing in those graphic organizers that he's given them, he begins to guide a closer reading to clarify the confusions. I would venture to say that one of the things students were having trouble with, just based on the type of questions that he's asking, is the difference between life back then and life now. They were probably being asked to compare and contrast, and maybe we're having trouble, so then he had them go back into the text to find evidence of the difference between that period of time and our period in time. And he did a great job also of creating a real-world connection by saying, I don't know if I would be able to survive without those things, okay? And also talking about, do we ride horses to school? Let me see if there's any other comments here. The students have the same graphic organizers that he is using. I can't tell from the video, but I would venture to say yes, that the teacher is going to have the students filling out the graphic organizer and then modeling how he's capturing their answers. And he actually said, let's put that on our sequence chart. And if I wouldn't have paused the video, you would have seen the children actually writing it on their own graphic organizer. Okay, thank you again for your active participation. It makes a difference. In the past, too many teachers have avoided teaching the same selection multiple times. So this rereading for multiple purposes might be a big shift in some classrooms, because the reason why teachers have avoided teaching the same selection multiple times is for fear that the students would be bored. And just really quickly in the question box, I want you to let me know, what did you notice as far as the students? We focused on what the teacher was doing. What did you notice as far as the students and their level of engagement? So just type that in your question box. I see there were There was evidence of active participation. Thank you, Kelly. And Diane says that the groups engage more with each other. Linda says, I'm sorry, that was Diane. And Linda says that they seem to be engaged and interested, and it didn't seem like they feel threatened in any way. Very good. Lisa mentions that Partner Talk helps keep students engaged. And Jennifer says they were actively engaged even during the partner share. So again, you know, I'm scrolling down and everybody's mentioning how the students were actively participating. There was a high level of engagement. So the students didn't feel bored. They didn't seem bored even though they were going back into a text they had already read. As a matter of fact, I would say that they're getting more interested because now they're starting to understand what maybe they were confused about before. Now they understand what they're being asked to focus on, and he was being very specific about what he wanted them to focus on and have their discussions about. So the students were highly engaged due to the type of questions that piqued their interest in finding out more about the story, and they were allowed to engage in collaborative conversations with their peers. Therefore, rereading is not just for fluency building anymore, okay? It's critical for developing deeper meaning. So the rereading is not just to build fluency for the children to practice reading, but the purpose of the rereading during close reading is to actually develop a deeper understanding of the meaning of the text. Now, you see here that there's some examples of books that students might be reading in class. And since I'm not sure what all of you, which books all of you have already read, I thought I'd use the example just to provide you with another model of a story that we probably are all pretty familiar with, and it is a primary story, but it's the story of the Three Little Pigs. And when we think about the story of the Three Little Pigs, there's a lot happening in that story. There's a lot of repetition. But I'm going to pretend that you're my students, and we are focusing on the end of the story. So just bear with me as I model. Okay? On page 82 of our books, the author says in the second paragraph, but the third little pig was a clever little pig. And he had put a big pot of boiling water to bubble on the fire. Now, I've given the students this paragraph, and I could say, so when the author tells us that the third little pig is a clever little pig, what proof or what evidence, you know, depending on the level of the students that you're talking, what proof does the author give us? What does the author tell us to show us that that third little pig was actually clever? Okay, so just humor me and put and type in your question box, what is the text evidence that if you were in my class, based on the paragraph that I just read to you, you would cite as evidence that the third little pig was actually very clever, that he was a clever little pig. Okay, I see that Linda wrote, he was smart enough to think that a pot of boiling water would scare the wolf away. So thank you, Linda. Okay, the author was very explicit in this paragraph, giving us the evidence of why the third little pig was clever. And then I could also take the discussion to another level. Wait, let me read some of the things. The boiling water, you know, showed that he was smart enough. That was Diane. So I could now have my students go back into the story. And I say, now what I'd like you to do with your partners is I want you to find another example of how the third little pig was a clever pig. And now based on, I know you don't have the story in front of you, but if you did, we would all go to page 66. And what is one of the things, just based on your prior knowledge, I know that I'm asking for text evidence, but you don't have it in front of you, that the third little pig did that was pretty clever. And pretend you found it on page 66. Okay, Deborah said that the third little pig built his house out of bricks. And Claudia agrees, and so does Jennifer. So if you all had the book in front of you and you were my students, you would actually be going back into the story and looking for that piece of evidence. And another piece of evidence that you might say is that the third little pig remembered his mother's warning not to trust strangers. Okay? So all of these things, you see how you're actually having your students, this is a text-dependent question that's going to have them actually try to remember, locate, they're talking with their partners, they're delving deeper into the story, and that's going to help them understand better why the author chose to put the clues and the examples and the events in the story that he did. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Let's look at a close reading routine that you can use in your classroom. And just so that you don't go crazy trying to copy everything that's on the slide, I do want to let you know that you will be receiving a handout with this routine on it. There will be a follow-up email in about a week from this presentation, and you'll receive the presentation, the links to the videos, and a handout that has this spelled out for you. But first, we start out by having the students read the selection once carefully. They can take notes about anything important or confusing using Cornell notes or two-column notes or some other form of a useful organizer. Okay? This taking of notes helps students to monitor their comprehension, such as noting places of confusion in the text or words that they don't know the meaning to. It helps them to summarize key ideas presented in the text. And when the teacher looks at these notes, what a student says and doesn't say will be quite helpful when revisiting the text for the second read, a close reading. Okay, so the teacher is going to use what the students are capturing during the first read to guide the second reading or the close reading of the text. Then the teacher guides students through a close reading. Students reread the text and discuss important shorter passages from the selection. You saw that in the video. For example, the students may be asked to read key passages connected to the big ideas in the text. The students work together and find text evidence to answer the text-dependent questions. And this can involve partner work and collaborative conversations, as you saw in the video. Finally, students write about what they've read to better comprehend the text. They're required in their writing to include text evidence. So their analysis must include text evidence. Since they've analyzed the text in greater depth a second time and engaged in academic collaborative conversations about the text during the close reading, the writing about the text will be much easier for them and much richer in detail. Here on the slide, you see a common way that you might begin a close reading with your students, the way that we heard in the video. As you were reading, I noticed a few things that were puzzling to some of you. It helps to take a second close reading of a selection to clarify confusion. And so who remembers how the teacher knew that some things were puzzling to the students during their first read? What was the teacher using to help him discover that students were confused about what they were reading? Linda and Kelly both said he used the students' notes, and that's absolutely right. He used what he was seeing there. He was noticing that there was some confusion, and rather than just plowing through, and Lisa says teacher observation, right? Rather than just plowing through and going to the next thing on the lesson plan, he's going to stop and he's going to take note of where the confusion exists and bring that to the surface and help the students understand, clarify that misunderstanding or that confusion. So the teacher glanced at the notes the students took while reading the first time. Another option is for the teacher to read the selection and mark those places he or she thinks the students will struggle with due to either the way the text is written, the background needs of the students, or any other aspect of the text that might make it complex for the students. I see here there's a question, do students read independently first or with a partner or both? In the lessons that I've observed, I see both. Sometimes the students do a silent read, sometimes they do a whisper read, sometimes they do a partner read, and I think that's going to be that's going to depend on the reading level of the students and also the students' needs. We always base everything that we do in the classroom on the students' needs. So I've seen both. Okay. We also know that, and again, I'm going to say, so you don't feel like you have to write all of this down, you're going to get a handout, okay, with all of this. So we also know that finding text evidence may be a new concept for our students. That's why it's really important that we frequently model how to find text evidence and require students to do so during any discussion that we're having about the text. So here are 4 simple steps to modeling finding text evidence. First, find where in the text you can go to find support for your answer. So actually having the students go into the text and find evidence to support their answer. Number 2, asking students to identify relevant and specific words, phrases, or sentences in the text. And you can also refer to photos and text features. Differentiate between text that explicitly states the answer to a question and text that allows you to figure out or make a relevant inference to determine the answer. And 4, use text evidence to state or write an answer to the question in your own words. So during discussion about a text, it's essential that the student specifically identifies where in the text he or she got the answer. So you saw, for example, in the video, the teacher pointing out the paragraph, the page, and the paragraph that he wanted the students to refer to. So you might, the students might say, on page 75, in the second paragraph, it says, and then they would cite the evidence that they're using to support their answer. So in review, today we've looked at one aspect of the Common Core State Standards that's receiving increased focus. We explored what close readings are and why they are important and how to conduct a close reading in your own classroom. I really hope this presentation gave you some ideas in terms of next steps for your classrooms and schools, as well as some things to think about as you transition to implementing the Common Core State Standards. And I want to thank all of you for your time and for your active participation, your generous listening. And if you have any other questions that you would like answered, please do that in the question box so that we can make sure to capture those questions, and we promise we will address them and send you a response to your question. You're welcome, Linda. She's saying thank you. Oh, I'm glad you guys found it helpful. Wonderful. Thanks for all the nice comments, guys.